Here's a school with enviable new facilities and buildings. But something is amiss. The bursar is scraping off chewing gum, the sports pitches don't have the correct markings, and the newly installed water fountains aren't working.
Hornsey School for Girls is a large comprehensive with specialist performing arts college status in North London. It was one of the first schools in the country to receive Private Finance Initiative PFI funding. Over the next few years, many more schools will be funded in this way under the Building Schools for the Future programme.
The way PFI works is that a private contractor provides funding for large projects in return for long-running maintenance and management contracts.
But what are the implications of being part of a PFI scheme for a school trying hard to save money?
Claire Dix is a DCSF procurement expert. Her challenge is to see if she can help Hornsey School for Girls get real value for money. First, school bursar Breda Donoghue and head teacher Andy Yarrow show us what the injection of PFI cash has done for the school.
One was this building we're standing in now. This is a performing arts building. This is what I often call our jewel in the crown because it's a lovely building, an excellent learning environment for the students. And this building for us is particularly important because for the last 4 years we've been a specialist performing arts school. And so this has put across a very powerful message about how important music and drama and the arts are for us here at Hornsey.
2, 1, let's all please now move into our ending freezes. Incredibly still, think about your points of focus. Brilliant.
In addition to that, the whole school was refurbished. Remodelling of classrooms, repainting and new carpeting and flooring.
And how much was the investment?
It was around about maybe 6.8 million, and then the school added another just under £500,000 to add an additional floor to this building.
Would you be able to do all this if you hadn't had PFI funding?
No, there's no way the school's budget would have been able, even over quite a long time, to be able to fund that level of refurbishment. It would be impossible.
What's the other side of the deal?
Well, the school is tied into a facilities management contract for 25 years. Obviously, any company that invests millions of pounds in refurbishing a school will be expecting to make a return in the longer term for their investment.
You're now 6 years into this contract. Would you say the deal's working for you?
There are some things that we're happy about and others that are quite frustrating. Because we're not in control of the contractors that are doing the work, sometimes there are very long delays and there's nothing we can do to speed up the completion of those jobs.
It's not just delays. There are other niggling issues about the PFI contract, as Breda explains when she shows us around.
Okay, so here we have one of our English classrooms that's been remodelled under the PFI construction.
What kind of issues affect a classroom like this?
Specifically in classrooms, it's chewing gum. Given that we have got a ban on chewing gum, this is what happens when children try to get rid of it.
You have a cleaning contract, so...
Yes, we do, but it isn't in the contract. It just says that all surfaces should be free of dust and debris at the start of each school working day. So their argument is that because it's not specified, chewing gum doesn't come under the heading of debris, basically.
So who actually cleans it?
Usually me. I would be there scraping away for maybe half an hour or an hour, and they would pick it up and dispose of it in the bins.
The school has monthly meetings with the contractor and the local authority about these issues. It's not just the chewing gum that's bothering them, it's also the markings on the all-weather sports pitches.
The PE curriculum in the autumn term is for hockey and it's laid out for a football. The request for hockey lines went in July for them to be ready in September. They weren't ready in September. We've made at least 5 requests for having them done. It's come up twice at our monthly meetings and they still haven't been done. We've got to the point where we don't need those now because we're into the spring term and we've got a different PE curriculum. We now need athletics markings and who knows if they're going to be ready in time.
There's yet another issue, the school's new drinking fountains.
These are our water fountains that we had installed about 4 months ago to replace some that we had internally. But as you can see, that's the best we can get out of them.
That's ridiculous, it's no use at all.
No, it's not, and they've not worked properly since they were installed. Although we have, raised the issue with the contractor.
Right.
So far, nothing's been done about them.
What is the system for getting the contractor to fix these sort of problems?
We would have to log a call with the help desk, and basically it's just a question of following up, checking that they've done it.
So Claire, what are your first thoughts?
Well, there are two aspects here, and critically, because the school is operating under a majority of PFI contracts that have another 19 years to go, it's really quite critical that they manage the contracts much better. So there's large elements of contract management advice that's needed here. And then the second aspect is really looking at the contracts that they do have influence over and ensuring that they really do get really good value for money.
Okay. Well, while we go off and do our research, here's our cautionary tale.
A very large rural comprehensive wanted its students to look smart for games. They decided to source polo shirts embroidered with the school logo. They calculated the contract had a potential value of £15,000. They prepared a specification and sent tenders out to prospective suppliers. They were pleased with the response and the samples they received. They picked a supplier and placed an order. The first delivery arrived and everyone was very excited about trying on the new shirts emblazoned with the school logo. However, they quickly realised that they were all adult sizes and too big for many of the children. The school had forgotten to specify the right size. Oops.
Because of the PFI contract at Hornsey School for Girls, there are only limited areas of the budget which Andy and Breeder have control over. So it makes Claire's task of finding worthwhile savings very difficult.
There's catering, which is nil cost to the school. On photocopiers, which cost the school £40,000 per year, Claire's found a better deal by looking at consortia prices for similar machines. This would save the school £5,000 per year.
Stationery costs Hornsey School £130,000 a year, which works out at £90 per pupil.
Claire did a benchmarking exercise and discovered that other schools spend between £30 and £80 per pupil per year. Hornsey should be able to cut back and thus save around £15,000 a year. That makes a total saving of £20,000 per year. What does Andy think about that?
Well, definitely good news, certainly. One wouldn't want to turn down £20,000, but bearing in mind that our school's budget is over £7 million, it somewhat puts that into context and shows there isn't really very much room for manoeuvre, largely because of the PFI contract that we've been discussing.
So we're bringing in PFI expert Glenn Richer to advise Andy and Breeder on managing the PFI contract.
More and more schools are going to be dealing with PFI contracts in the future. So first of all, is Hornsey's school experience typical?
It's not really typical. I mean, the good news these days is that the contracts have progressed. Hornsey School and the PFI that it was part of was one of the early ones, and people weren't so used to negotiating these type of contracts. One of the most important things is the level of detail that you put into any agreements that you have with the contractor for the PFI contract. And things like the maintenance issues as well have to be very clearly specified, and the response times included in the output specification, which may have to be looked at again given the state that we're now at with this particular PFI.
So you can modify these contracts even though they're signed for periods of up to 25 years?
Well, that's right. One of the features of these type of contracts, because they are for 25 years, it isn't really reasonable to expect they're going to stay the same for that period of time. And there's no reason why those agreements can't be looked at again.
Well, I'm genuinely surprised that we do have the power to renegotiate aspects of the contract.
Because any time we have raised issues, we've more or less been told that the contract is set for 25 years and that's it.
Do remember that your PFI contract is part of a larger agreement with a number of schools involved, and the more coordination that you can do to make sure that you and the other schools who are involved in this process, the more leverage you're going to have with the contractor.
So that's our general advice, but we can give you some specific advice for you to take to your next meeting with the LEA and the contractor. Claire's going to tell you the details.
Let's go for one of the examples we've discussed on our previous visit, and that was the water fountains. What I suggest in the first instance is to actually look at whatever specification was given in the first place. Now, if there wasn't one, and we only asked for water fountains to be installed, then you need to actually formulate one to actually go to them and say, we expect this level of service as a minimum. And you need to agree timescales when you expect work to be done, etc. You could say that if work isn't completed within a particular timescale, that you'd want them to remove their water fountains because it's actually not fit for purpose. And I would say that I felt that that was a health hazard, that that was not hygienic, that the only way the children could use that was if they actually cross-contaminated in some way. And To be honest, I think using that kind of language when you complain actually is what spurs somebody on to actually do something about it.
I hadn't really thought about actually managing the contract for own advantage. I'm going to be much more assertive now in terms of clearly articulating what those timescales are and making sure that I do all in my power to make sure that the various contractors stick to them.
While Andy and Breeder mull over Claire's advice, here's our top tip. St Helens Primary School in Huntingdon discovered it was spending more than £1,000 a year on printer cartridges, so one of the governors decided to see how he could reduce the cost.
I contacted my local consortia supplier who listened to our requirements and then recommended that we go for the latest multifunctional device.
The idea is that instead of using 20 standalone printers, all the school's computers will be networked to this one central machine, which can also fax and scan in colour and print and staple booklets.
The big advantage of multifunctional device is that your cartridge costs and maintenance are covered in your basic cost per copy, which then makes a huge savings. You don't need to buy the expensive cartridges anymore.
You can also save on electricity by having just one machine on standby, and save on paper because this machine prints on both sides. St Helens Primary School will cut its printing costs by £700 per year. Contact your local consortium for advice on network printing and save money. It's 2 weeks since we were at Hornsey School for Girls, and I've come back to find out how Breeder and Andy get on today at their meeting with the contractor and the local authority. We weren't allowed to film the meeting, but
2.5 hours later, what do you think, Breeder?
Well, I think we made marginal progress, put it that way, and certainly that the advice that we were given by Claire has helped a lot. Knowing the contract, we were able to bring aspects of that into it during the meeting, checking on things and refuting some statements that were made. So from that point of view, it was good. And we've also been able to clarify what the penalty clauses is, what happens if work doesn't get done. And that's something that then we will be feeding back to see if we can get the output specification or the contract changed.
In the meeting, we were the only people who had the contract there, and so we were a lot more assertive, a lot more confident, and simply saying, can we have a deadline for that, please? Can we agree that will be done by next Wednesday, for example, and things like that, I think was very effective.
with PFI, what's important is getting best value from the contract. Look at this. The water fountains are now working. Well, Breeder, how did you manage it? You were banging your head against a brick wall before.
Yes, well, we took Claire's advice from the last time you were here. We emailed the contractor and we pointed out that the fountains weren't up to specification, the health and safety implications of trying to drink from them. So we asked them to either get them repaired immediately or replace them with something else. And they were fixed the next day.
So you got a result?
Yes, indeed.